So hi again, this is Dr. Sneath. We're back in building 10 with what looks like a very decapitated Channel 9 guy. I don't know what's going on there. What do these WPF guys do with our cherished mascot? I don't know. Anyway, I'm here with two guys from Avalon who have been here for the last couple of months, I guess, as interns. So why don't you introduce yourselves?
I'm Sarah Perry. I'm a dev intern on Avalon.
I'm Chapala Street. I'm a PM intern under Kevin. You might remember him from such Channel 9 videos as the Kevin button.
Let's not discuss Kevin Button. It's come and gone.
Who could forget? We had such a blast sort of just reading the comments from people who'd spent ages adjusting their audio to try and get Kevin Button to work right. But that's cool. So tell me, what do you do as an intern? How does the intern thing work at Microsoft?
You can go ahead.
Okay. Well, she got here first, and then when I got here, I was assigned Kevin as my mentor. He contacted me maybe 2 or 3 weeks before I was supposed to get here and told me to play around with WPF a little bit. And then when I got here, he went over 2 or 3 possible projects that I could work on, and I got to choose which one sounded most interesting and would affect the most people. So we decided to make charting controls for WPF. And then I had to do some competitive research on charting controls and utilities that already exist and are in the market so that we could make something better than those. And then I got a dev here to help me implement them after I spec'd everything up.
That's fun.
Or before you spec'd everything up.
So just like the real world of being a program manager then, I guess, you've got a very realistic experience. So where were you before you were here? Where are you studying?
I'm at Brown University.
Brown, okay.
Yes.
University of Arizona.
Okay, cool. And how did you find out about Microsoft's internship program?
A friend of mine actually moved up here to work full time, and so I heard about it from him.
The recruiter from Brown actually contacted me and asked me if I wanted to interview.
Okay.
And actually, my cousin had interviewed here worked here last summer, and so he'll be starting full time sometime in the future. I don't know really when,
Wow. And so, I mean, what's it been like? Just forgetting about what you've been doing for a moment. What's it like to work as an intern at Microsoft? Is it like you expected it to be, or?
No, but I think my experience was a little bit different. When I first started, this was my 3rd project that I got, and my first 2 fell through. So
oh boy,
I got here. Chapala got here 2 weeks after me, and I got the project the same day as he did. So yeah, so it was a little bit shaky at first. Other than that, it's been smooth.
How about for you, Chapala?
I liked it. It was actually a bigger project than I thought it would be that affected more people, so that's cool. I like playing soccer at lunch on Tuesdays. Get to deal with my mentor. It was cool. We actually have a really good team. It was sort of surprising. All the interns in my office are cool, and then we have Sarah and Marco down the hall. We all get along really great. He doesn't, one of our intern friends doesn't like his team as much.
Oh, boy.
And so I haven't had that problem, and none of the people in Avalon have had that problem. So I feel lucky for that. And our house is great, so.
Incorrect answer. So, I mean, what was your preconception of the Microsoft culture? I mean, did you imagine that you would sort of go in some elevator down to down 20 levels into the earth, or what was your expectation of Microsoft as a company before you came here?
My cousin had given me a pretty good idea of what it was like.
Okay.
He said he liked his job. His team, and I talked to people at Brown who had interned here previously, and I got this feeling of it's sort of very team dependent. You either like your team or you don't like your team, and that sort of seems to be a recurring theme with a lot of people.
Right.
I heard the same thing. A lot of people either liked their internship or didn't, and 90% of it had to do with who they were working with and the team they were on. So, but I had a pretty good idea too, because I had friends who worked up here.
Right.
And then there's of course the rumors about how you're working 100-hour weeks and all that.
It's not worked out like that. Okay, just waiting for the. Anything that's particularly surprised you about working here? I mean, anything that's particularly, different to how you thought it might be, or?
I came here from IBM, and they're very, very structured about their hours and things like that. So the whole "we don't care how many hours you work if you get your stuff done" concept was new to me.
Right.
So that took some getting used to.
About yourself?
I like Seattle more than I thought I would. I'm the last person to say like a place is a pretty place, but it's sort of nice to see Mount Rainier in the background. You're like, oh, that's actually a volcano that could blow up. But yeah, so Seattle's nice. Everyone talks about it rains a lot in the winter, and I haven't really had to deal with that, so I'm not really sure what to make of it. But it's a nice area.
So your pitch for Microsoft is come here and get covered in lava or something. It's sort of
Come here in the summer.
Okay, I guess that's going to really help us recruit next year's interns. Thank you for that. So tell us a little bit about what you've been working on. I mean, WPF obviously. What have you been building?
We've been building a chart control so that users can just input data and we can represent it with a bar chart or a pie chart.
Mm-hmm.
And they can represent it or they can, the input can be just as simple as here's some numbers, put it in a graph, or as, complex as here's a list of objects I want you to look, through this path and bind to this path and, and then graph this property on this object. And so it goes from very simple to very complex. And same with templating it. Everything on the graph can be templated. So they can do something as simple. There's smart defaults. So if they just want to give numbers and draw me a plain chart, then it'll do that. But they can also they can add animation. They can add all kinds of colors and pretty much make it look exactly like they want. So
right, cool. So how's it worked out? I mean, you guys, you've taken the PM role, right, and you've taken the developer role. So, how did you go about that process?
Well, she got here 2 weeks before me, so she was a lot more familiar with WPF than I was.
Right.
So my first 2 weeks was sort of just feeling out WPF, and by that time she was really ready to go on something. So we could just talk about what we wanted to do and how we thought we might implement it, and she'd go ahead and implement it, and then I'd start writing the spec and spec up what she had written or add something to the spec and have her change it, and that worked out really well because we can just talk together. She's right down the hall and we get along great, so it worked out pretty well. So
a bit of an agile process there that you kind of drove it. So did you do it, how did you figure out what features to add? What does it just scratched your itch, or was it sort of
me and Kevin sat down and first I had to do the competitive research that I talked about, so from that we saw a lot of features that would be nice to have, but we couldn't implement them all. And so me and Kevin sat down and just sort of talked about which ones were more important and what utility they added to the users, gave to the users,
right?
And which ones would be more useful to them and stuff like that. And then from there we sort of chopped off a lot of the features and settled on a good set of V1 features, and then some features for V2 that would be nice to implement.
Cool.
We did start off pretty ambitious, though. We had originally, I remember meeting with Chapal and we talked about doing, we looked through all the graphs in Excel and what types of graphs they had, and we said, we'll do a line chart and a scatter plot and 5 or 6 different graphs, and we ended up just doing 2 because it ended up being more complicated than we expected. But
right.
Yeah.
So I'm eager, obviously, to see some demos of it and see kind of how you went about building it and perhaps look at some of the code. But before we do that, I'm just interested in your learning experiences in terms of getting up to speed with WPF. How did you figure out how WPF worked, get to grips with the object model? Did you read about it? Did you code? How did you overcome that learning curve kind of thing?
Well, I was here for 2 weeks without a project, so I did a lot of reading.
Right.
The SDK document, the documentation is great. There's a lot of really good, articles. And I had an idea of what type of project, so I read about data binding, the data binding overview, and went through all that. And then they also supplied me with some labs that I could do. So that helped get used to actually coding it, not just reading about it. So I'm not sure what you did.
We got an O'Reilly book on WPF, which was semi-interesting to read and very outdated. So whenever we had to go implement something, it wouldn't work. So I'd have to go running to someone else like, why doesn't this work? It should work right here.
Right.
And it was all outdated. So hopefully they'll have a different book that is up to date.
So that's the Christelle Z and Griffiths book, I guess, is it?
Sure. I wouldn't be surprised if Kevin had a copy right here.
So I know they're working on a new edition of that, and a ton of other books. I know that Charles Petzel has just gone to press with his XAML plus code equals something or other.
Equals application. I think?
Application maybe.
Exactly. For some of those too.
Equals bugs or.
No. Not RC1. It's all.
Okay. Cool. Cool. So, what kinds of things surprised you about WPF? What things did you find harder to learn than you were expecting?
I guess for me, there's a lot of I had been programming in C for the last 2 years basically, and so I was used to having to do everything myself. I mean, malloc memory. I mean, from everything. And so coming here, I forget to think. I tried to reinvent the wheel many times,
right?
Not realizing that things were done for me, and so that was something to get used to.
Right.
That's something along the lines of that. I sort of like those details, and so sometimes I get frustrated when I can't do them.
Right.
Or I think they should be done a different way.
Right.
There's a lot of very specific XAML syntax that you have to get used to, and just sort of like data binding with little squiggly brackets when you use them, when you don't.
Right.
Or binding to like XML when you use the little @ sign or when you don't.
Uh-huh.
So that stuff is kind of frustrating at first, just
Right.
to get the hang of and get down. But once
Right.
you get it down, then it's just like, okay, second nature.
Right. Yeah, I guess a lot of those things you kind of they're hard to debug as well as in terms of it's hard to kind of even figure out
Right.
what's not working.
Definitely, yeah. The XAML errors aren't the prettiest. Like null exception here.
Right.
And you're not declaring anything.
Right.
It's how it's getting interpreted. You're like, oh god.
Yeah, so that's painful, I guess. Anything that kind of really sort of grabbed you as, wow, that makes life a whole lot simpler? I mean, you must have used things like the styles and templating and things like that. And is that a revelation to you guys, or was it,
Yeah, once you get past the frustration of like, once you get it compiling,
Yeah.
you're like, oh, that was so easy to do.
Right.
So, there's just that frustration of compiling
Uh-huh.
is the main thing. But then once you get it done, it's like, wow, I didn't have to do anything.
Right.
I just told it what
Yeah.
color I wanted to be in. It's that color.
Right.
Now it transitions from that color to this different color. That's great.
Right. And then I guess another question is what kind of tips would you give to somebody else who was starting off with WPF? Well, knowing
It gets better.
it gets better. Okay.
Start small, like try to do
Yeah.
just little things very incrementally, so you can see where your errors are. Because especially when you're making a big XAML project, it's hard to find where exactly your error might be. So if you just add things and compile it right away, you say, okay, that's great, that works.
Right.
And when you add another small thing and it breaks, you can say, okay, that's my problem right there.
Right.
And then go about debugging it instead of just coding it all up and having like it crash and just like, oh my god, did I misspell a word, or did I actually not add like a thing that needs to be there?
So that very iterative kind of process.
Yeah, definitely.
Right.
And
Yeah, I
just to
agree.
be fair with some of the points they're making, that I think both of you are still running on beta 2 builds. And there's been a lot of work since beta 2 to improve a lot of the XAML kind of compilation and error message stuff. And so we were cruel and made them work on. They're deving and demoing on Vista.
Right.
In their offices, they're using Vista, and it's all beta 2 stuff. And so kind of that sort of pain we heard long before they got here, and
Right.
have done a lot of work hopefully to make some of that stuff better. So.
Welcome to the world of our customers, Kevin.
Exactly. Yeah. I hear we have these people that make our salaries, and so try to do the right thing for them.
So I guess that those kind of things about starting iteratively and kind of coding through. I'm interested also to know what kind of tools you used. I mean, did you try using Expression at all? Did you use Visual Studio, XAML pads, Notepad?
I didn't use XAML pad. I'm sort of like the low level. Like, I think I should be doing everything low level, so I like to do things by hand. So,
Visual API for everything.
Exactly. So I just decided that I'd code all my XAML stuff by hand, just because I figured I'd learn it better.
Right.
Especially now, like one time I then sure, why not use some graphical editors to throw in and
Right.
do the little bitch work? But
So like sort of Visual Studio, XAML editor,
yeah,
right?
just edit it in Visual Studio.
Okay, cool.
I
And how
use
about
Visual
yourself?
Studio.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Did you try Expression at all? You didn't even look at
Some of my
that?
office mates used Sparkle.
Okay.
They said they liked it.
Yeah.
When they wanted to go and edit the XAML that it produced, it was kind of annoying, but
Right.
it produced what they wanted most
Right.
of the time.
Right.
So.
Again, obviously we're in early stages. I mean, as we record this in early August, we're sort of that product is not finished yet.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's useful to know. So let's see the control. Give us a demo if you wouldn't mind. I'd love to kind of see a little bit of what you.
Sure.
Just a bit of a reconfigure of the room here.
Just run it, right? Or do we want to look through the classes?
Let's see it first. Let's give us a demo.
Is that 5 still in F5?
Okay, so this is the very basic. This has all the defaults, so all the default colors, all the default, fonts and sizes and everything.
Can you just move it over to the other monitor? Is that right? The CRT's flickering terribly. That's better.
Okay.
Cool. Thank you.
Okay.
It's gone again.
Where'd it go?
Zooming in. There we go.
I was trying to resize it here.
Cool.
There we go. So resize it.
That's fine.
And then you can change the background. So you supply a brush for the background. See the font. The font for the labels is different. And these are each. So all the labels are actually just. They're not labels. They're content presenters. So you can put whatever you want in those. You can put images. You can put anything you want. Right now, these have the default is a text block, and it wraps around. So if you have long labels, it takes care of that. And here they've supplied a label with a different font, and so you can put. These are also content presenters, so you can put images and.
And you've got kind of hover effects going on there as you sort of draw on one.
So this is actually going to change to a more of a fade in and out because that's a little bit offensive to my eyes. This is a pie chart. This one takes a start brush and an end brush, and it changes as it goes around. So you just have to give it a color to start with and end with, and it changes the RGB values. And then we have the legend over here for the color for what the colors are, and you can also set the background for this. And then there's the animation. So you can do something as simple as this original, or you can add this is just adding a template that has animation. So and then it also supports dynamic data. So you can remove things. Well, this doesn't necessarily show it, but if the list is changing, it'll change with it.
No,
so.
removed Ivan. It removed Ivan.
Oh yeah, I removed Ivan.
Cool.
Anything else you want to talk about, Kevin? No?
So I guess show me just imagine for a moment this is just a binary and I've just got the DLL. How show me the kind of the end user kind of usage of this.
Okay.
Like how did you build this?
So
Let me show. Where's the real simple one?
That's the first.
So you just create. This is the very first one that was real simple. You just create a bar chart, and you just give it children that have. So here you're saying. Let's see. You want a group on names. So that means that the labels at the bottom are. They go into whatever this object is that is in the list of.
Right.
Children, and they find the name, whatever the name property is, that's what is displayed at the bottom. So in here, in this case, it would be, group 1, group 2, group 3, and so on. And the value binding, you provide a binding that tells you what value you actually want to graph. So It goes into its list and says, I want to look for the quantity property, get that value, and then draw the bar or the pie slice accordingly.
Right.
So that's the very simple one. You don't have to specify a background. You don't have to specify any colors or anything complex at all.
And the my namespace bit is just the reference to your DLL, right? That's not part
correct.
of the. It's not like a really ropey name for the bar chart.
Let's see. Where's the? Let's see. Oh, right here. So in here you can specify a lot more than just these basic 3 things. Here let's see.
That part right there. That's the bar chart.
Okay. So it also specifies the group on and the value binding, but in addition to it supplies a background brush, a template for the labels, for each of the labels, the vertical and the horizontal, and then this is where it tells instead of like we did up here, just supplying the list right here, you can bind the item source to a list.
Right.
Also, and it'll just go into this list and look for the name property and the weight change property. And then and so the list that it's binding to fruits is
Right there.
Oh, weight change is actually a piece of data.
weight changes. Okay, so Sorry.
The list fruits was actually a list of people. So that's where weight changed. That's actually where age and height.
Yeah.
So we've got some slightly dodgy data going on up here then.
These are kind of different fruits than you've ever
Right.
Check mirror out really.
Right. There's a person who's called Raspberry who has a shoe size of 150 and an age change of -8. Gee whiz.
And a weight of negative
Okay.
130.
I love the business case here. I'm starting to see the value proposition for.
So our list is called fruits. It's made up of people, and so it's going in and seeing that there's person objects in this list which have a it's finding to have a weight change.
Right. Ignore the data types. Just focus on the charts.
Yeah. So it goes into this list and it looks for the particular property on each item.
Right.
And graphs it accordingly.
Right. So where you've got that binding there for that bar chart, some of those things there, you've got bounds to the actual data values in the data island, like that weight change. But others you've got, and that's coming from that item source, right? So just like any other object, like a list box or something like that, you're just saying this is where I want to get the data from, and this is the property I want to, or the element I want to bind to within that.
Right.
Okay. And then you've got the template stuff going on, and that's driving the actual look and feel of it, right?
Right. So you can have, like I said, from the very beginning, or very simple, basic chart to however you want it to look, and you could, let's see, let me run this real quick again. Any of these bars, they could be, any of these bars could be ellipses, they can be images, they can be, images or rectangles with squiggly lines. However you want to draw them, you can draw them. So
how so there you've specified, for example, what is it? I guess it's the background. Oh, the background brush is just specifying there the actual image there, but you could have overridden something to say actually I wanted that to be something completely different.
Right. So the background brush could be an image brush, or it could be anything.
Right.
Brush selector.
Yeah.
That's what we're using for the
What's that?
The brush selector
Are we doing that for the background?
for the fruits, the bars.
Oh, this is the template selector. So this is for the fruits, right?
You can tell this is a raw and unvarnished video whilst the developer and the PM discusses how the heck this thing is implemented.
Well, the PM wrote this, so maybe you should go through this.
Okay, so other than for a bar chart, you can either let the default template of the bar take effect, or you could declare a template for all the bars to be. So if I didn't want the bars to be blue, I could say all the bars will be red.
Right.
And that is set by a property called all bar template. Or you could, for this chart, which what I did is I set one bar template selector, and what that does is it creates a template selector which then has a callback for each bar.
Right.
And on that callback it asks for a template. So when this bar was created, it said, give me a template for the strawberries object. And then I returned a template with a strawberry picture.
Right.
And then it said, give me a template for the apples object, and I returned a template with the apple picture, and so on for every bar. So that's why they all have different pictures on it.
So that's coming from this picture template provider.
Yes.
And is that's like a C# class, is it?
Yes, it's you have to extend, what was it? Data template provider?
Data template selector.
Yeah.
Data template
So just
selector.
like just in items control in Avalon or in content control like button, we have these concepts and we just reuse them here. So this is actually subclassing framework element is the base class.
So can you show us the code for that picture template provider then?
Yes.
Okay, Jonah.
That is actually it's not Avalon. It's in. So the picture template provider is right here.
Right.
So we
So that's
extend
deriving from.
data template selector, and then select template gets called for every object in the list, and then I cast that object to a person because that's what it is, or fruit.
Right.
And then check what the name of that fruit is.
person fruit thing is.
Yeah, and then if it's strawberries, then I have a strawberry template already defined in XAML, and I just return that.
Okay. So then just show us that strawberry template thing, just so we've really gone from soup to nuts.
That strawberry template is right
I see.
here.
So we really have got a bit of XAML that is saying use this class to decide what this bar looks like, and then that class in turn is referring back to a data template which just describes the look and feel of that.
Exactly.
Right. Cool.
So, and then all the data for the actual graph is held in Chart Control. So Chart Control, this is what keeps track of whatever property or whatever binding it is that you want, you know, determines the height of the bar and the size of the pie slice. And then this is the Groupon property, and then it keeps track of the item source and all the underlying data for the graph. And then each individual class, like the bar chart and pie chart, they just take care of how to draw it. So.
Right. So let's just talk through a little bit about that as well. Just educate us on like how properties are handled in WPF from that perspective. Like I see you have this dependency property that you're registering. Just explain for those people listening who perhaps aren't familiar with dependency properties how that works.
Dependency properties are used when you want to be able to bind to it, right?
Or templated.
Right? You know this.
Yeah.
Stop turning around to the Jedi Master.
This is their exit interview, actually. They have to get all these questions right.
Because they'll leave the company after today.
Exactly.
So
No, Chapala actually had between the two, yes. So it's, go ahead, one more time.
It's to bind, template, or style.
to bind to template or to style.
Yes.
And there's other, like animations, there's a few things that you need for DP.
Right. Right. And so what does a dependency property actually do?
I'm sitting back here.
Hello.
Go wide again. The close look is
It's
bad.
the Kevin button. It's horrid.
Exactly. No clicking, please. The dependency property offers storage, basically. And so usually when you think about a property, when you build an object-oriented system, or especially in C# or VB.NET, you use a field to store the value. And the problem with that is sometimes you want other things to provide the value. Like in WPF, quite often we want to use a style to say provide the value for this button or this chart. And so dependency property allows you to use another element to provide a value. And so in that case, the other element could be a style for that object, it could be a binding, it could be an animation. And so the property engine basically in the property system in WPF allows you to have these other things that provide values. You can do a binding or a style or an animation.
Right.
And so it's and I've talked about this. If you read the control authoring guides in the SDK, Robbie and I talk about this a little bit. It's really important that if you build controls, especially, use dependency property because then people can bind your properties, they can style your properties, and it makes your controls as flexible as the controls in the system. And so that's kind of what Sarah and Chapala have designed here.
Right. Cool. So this is kind of like a good kind of prescriptive, practical way to kind of develop a control. You're just using the best practices for doing this.
Exactly. And the idea here is, their internships are running out here pretty soon, but
Sure.
when we do a refresh with the RC1 for WPF and Vista, I'm going to send an update to the bag of tricks, which I talk about a lot, and we'll include the chart control. So everyone here, hopefully, probably the time this video is out or around then, we'll have access to the source code.
Right.
I can see how we went about building chart control.
Right. Cool. I like it. Anything else you want to show us from the control? I mean, things that were difficult to do, like the animation bit, for example. That was something that we've not.
That's
talked about yet.
Chapala did that because he put together the demo. So
Okay.
Do you want to talk about the animation at all? Or?
Sure. The animation was just I declared templates. So I used the template provider, and then each template had a animation on the color of the bar, and so. So here's one of the styles.
So you've got a linear gradient brush. Oh, sorry,
Yeah.
looking below that style.
And so this is an animation for half a second.
Right.
And it goes from 0 alpha to 255 alpha.
Right.
And so just alphas in each bar
Okay.
in sequence. And you just have to make sure you assign the templates in the right order.
Right. Do you do any event handling? Like, can I trap somebody clicking on one of the bars and do something with that?
Those are V2 features. That
V2.
Like,
Yeah.
Okay. There's always a V2.
but yeah, user interaction is a big V2
Right.
like area that we'd like to get into because
Yeah.
doing a lot of competitive research, you can see some pretty cool features with mouse over and mouse click, like drill down.
Right.
So say you pie chart of fruits. You're a store and you sold like fruits, like produce, meat, and bread or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
You click on like the produce, and then it'd bring up another chart of vegetables, fruit, and something else green.
Right.
And if you click on vegetables, then it'd bring up tomatoes, carrots, and celery or something like that.
Right.
So there's like lots of cool user interaction things.
Right,
in
right,
charts and
right.
graphs.
Yeah.
Cool. And I mean, just obviously here you're binding to an XML data source, but because you've got this,
Well, actually, they're binding. Go ahead.
This is a XAML data source that
Okay.
declared in XAML
right?
earlier.
So actually, they define a C# object as person and people, and then Rob Aurelius spoke about this too, right?
Okay, yeah.
XAML is just a model for instantiating objects.
Right, right.
CLR objects, and so they define. Actually, go back to your window 1.xaml where you're setting those up. They're people or whatever else. Those are CLR objects, and we're just, they have a default constructor and public properties with gets and sets, and so those are just setting the age property and the height property using XAML.
Right.
So, and the way they built this is very similar to how items control works in WPF.
Right.
So in theory, you could bind to an actual XML island, actual XML
Right.
data. This looks like XML, but under the covers, we're actually instantiating the CLR objects.
Right. So here you're using an object data provider to actually connect to it.
Well, it's not an object data provider. This is actually just a way to instantiate a CLR object inline in the resource set.
Okay. Right.
And you could have instantiated this likewise using an object data provider.
Right.
As we've discussed before.
So
Right.
each one of these turns into a person object, and then this whole thing combined turns into a people object.
People
Right.
object,
Which
which
is
is an
a list of
observable
people.
collection.
Oh, okay, right. And then you're just binding to that literally directly, right? But I mean, the joy of WPF, as it were, is that because of the templating, you could do it anyway. You could bind to this. You could bind to some other bunch of objects. You could bind to an XML data provider. You could bind this control to ADO.NET, say, or a dataset or something like that.
Yes.
Cool. Very fun. Anything that sort of you're particularly proud of out of this, or any sort of feature that WPF made it particularly hard or particularly easy to implement?
I was happy to get the animation working
Okay.
without actually having to build it into her code. But you can do that with a template, so that's actually pretty cool.
Right,
Because
right.
I thought that almost all of our animation had to be built in by her, but
Right.
there's a fair amount that you can do. By
So it's nice that you've not had to actually sort of code a lot of those
Exactly.
things in there. You've got a lot of
just taken care of.
flexibility. Yeah.
That was one of our main goals for the project, was to make it as flexible as possible and as generic as possible, so the user could make it exactly like they want.
Right.
So
Right. Cool. So you're done. The end of this week, you go back to various parts of the country, and
She's done this week, and I'm done in 2 weeks.
okay, cool.
That whole starting different times.
Right,
Yeah.
right. You'd recommend it as an experience? It's been valuable?
Definitely.
oh, for sure, yeah.
I was hoping you'd say that, otherwise...
Have to edit that.
Yes.
You see, like,
Oh,
Yes.
yeah. Well, very cool. People adjusting their audio again.
yes in an English accent. Like,
Why does she have a voice?
she's really a man.
Microsoft has this transformative effect on people. Well, very cool. Thank you for showing us this. And so people can go to Kevin's blog, I guess, and we'll kind of link that up, and we'll make sure that we've got this there, or at least a kind of a feeble excuse why we haven't yet uploaded it there by the time the Channel 9 video goes live.
Yep.
Cool. Thanks, guys. Thanks for showing us this, and
Thank you.
good luck.
Thank you.